Hello, this is Future CX, recording this on June 15th, 2025, aka Father's Day. And before the video starts, I just wanted to say, like so many times, that I'm very sorry that it took so long to get this one done. Like, I wanted it to be released somewhere between mid-spring to early summer of 2024, but things just got in the way and did not pan out that I originally intended, mainly due to several different factors, like creative burnout, a lot of university work, the passing of my family members, a bad foot injury due to slipping, and just life in general. But I assure you that me and Rebellious Robot would finish this video and promise you almost a year and a half that the third part of the LEGO video game history by the time it comes out. However, there are two things being added in my future recordings, first being the end of my first segment, which I was not aware of a sequel to a Flash game that I completely forgot existed when I was gathering clips because Wikipedia failed to mention it. And the second being the word 2025, since again, it was originally supposed to come out in 2024 before all of this happened. So whenever you hear as of, which only happens 2 times when looking at the script, I'm going to be saying 2025, which happens to be from a Rebellious Robot segment. Hopefully he won't mind when I cut off the now incorrect year and say the actual correct year. Okay? Now with everything that I talked about being said and done, let's finally get on to the third part of the LEGO video game history that you're all waiting for. Enjoy.
If you haven't seen Part 1 and Part 2 of the history, the link is in the description below. In Part 3, we will discuss the history of the LEGO video games from 2002 to 2004, and how it almost ended the LEGO video games at the time. Here we go for the third time.
But first, we have to backtrack a little bit back to 2001. Why? Well, because we actually missed and completely forgot about one game after the release of Part 2. Sort of. So in order to fix this, I'm going to talk a little bit about LEGO Junkbot, or just called Junkbot alone. Released in 2001 as a Flash game where you have to help a robot called, obviously named Junkbot, to collect a bunch of trash from 4 different factories, which there are 15 levels in each factory, making the total amount of 60. All you need to do is stacking a bunch of Lego bricks, or colored brick since that is what it says in the game menu, in order to reach that trash can goal while avoiding obstacles and death traps, and that's about it. Honestly, this may be the shortest segment that we ever talked about, aside from LEGO Friends and the preschool/kindergarten games, and the other one later down the video. And nothing else to say more about it other than it's simple but a fun Flash game in the early 2000s. Though I do have 2 questions in mind. 1, what does this have to do with LEGO aside from similar Lego bricks? And 2, why is it on the LEGO video games Wikipedia page? Well, I don't really have an answer, nor that I don't have the time for it, because it will take too much time to discuss about it. So instead, I'll link in a video about it on the LEGO Gaming channel down in the description below. Either you want to pause the video or finish the video, depending you have the time or not. A year later, they would make a sequel called LEGO Junkbot Undercover, released in 2002. It's more so the same as the first, with the differences being the new elements, hazards, enemies, and an extra level called Project X, in which you have to complete all 4 factories to unlock it, thus surpassing the first with 61 levels. But aside from that, it is just the same game again, and nothing else to comment on aside from Junkbot being an undercover detective. but the objective is still collecting a bunch of trash. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's go on to the actual first segment of the third part of the video. Starting with a soccer game or football game if you're British called Lego Soccer Mania, or Lego Football Mania because again if you're British. Despite being published by Lego Software, it is notable for being the first Lego game to have a co-publisher alongside the main publisher, and that name is Electronic Arts, aka EA, and also aka the worst video game publisher of all time. And for the development team for the game, that goes to Silicon Dreams, the same team who made Lego Island 2. Despite no history information about this game, but I think, and it's just my theory, that the development for this game went a bit smoothly compared to their previous Lego game. Why, you may ask? Well, if you watch part 2 of that video, I said that the development studio were known for making a lot of soccer games, and seeing that the Lego game involves soccer, you can't possibly tell that they were excited about its development, but again, it's just a theory in mind. Anyways, moving on to the game. There are several different modes to choose from, like Quick Start, which is just a random match with a random team and that's it, Exhibition being a single match game where you choose your team member and selecting a location and bada boom, you're playing that said match, enough said. Skill Zones, where you have to partake in special practices to gain multiple skills and can even unlock special characters by doing so. And also need to pick up this mode first before actually starting the game. World Cup, where you pick a team and need to complete in 3 stages with multiple games and have to beat 3 teams in order to advance to the next stage, in order to win the Lego Cup. And finally, the story mode, where you basically have to beat every single team while the story progresses, which is mostly still images with text with the commentator saying the basic instruction of the game. The team winning and enters to the next stage and making short comments about the location you're playing on. However, halfway through the game, it starts going into a different direction where the Brickster, yes, that Brickster from the Lego Island games, steals the trophy and escapes through time. This would eventually come to a halt in the final stage where you can finally face off the Brickster and his team to win and get the trophy back, and that's about it for the modes. As for the gameplay itself, it plays like soccer, but added one element to the game, and that includes power-ups, either speed, shield, and etc. to make the game more suitable for younger audiences. So that way they won't get bored with it than just playing an average soccer game. And lastly are the teams and locations, which there are 18 teams, in which I'm not going to name them, but at least tell you that they're based on Lego brands like Adventures, Pirates, Knights, Martians, and Cowboys, just to name a few. And for the locations, they're also based on Lego brands and have very distinctive look to it for a soccer game, of course. And not just that, but the fields too. Why, you may ask? Well, most of the fields aren't usually rectangle shape, but they also have hexagon, octagon, and decagon shape fields to give its own feel to the stage and location. I don't think there hasn't been another soccer-related game that can change the shape of the soccer fields, at least to my knowledge. When the game was released originally for Microsoft Windows in June 18, 2002, it received some mediocre ratings upon its release, with the critic ratings giving it either mixed or bad reviews across its reception. But on the other side, for the user ratings, it was given a good reception. You can even tell in the Metacritic ratings where a bunch of users gave it a higher reception compared to the critic ratings, with some praise, despite 3 of the 4 users were from 2020, roughly 5 years ago, and it's not actually the PC version, but the PS2 version instead, since it didn't give it a Metacritic rating. Speaking of the PS2, when this was released the same day as the Windows version, it received the same reception because it was the same version like its computer counterpart, with the only difference being the graphical limitation, given that it was the only home console version ever made. And a day before the Windows and PS2 releases, shockingly, it would get a GBA port released in June 17, 2002, which was developed by Tiertex Design Studios based in Macclesfield, England. Like the other 2 versions, it received mixed to bad reception and all that. As for this port, it plays in an isometric view with pixel sprites, but overall the same experience and nothing else to comment on. While this game is nowhere near as remembered as the earlier 2000s LEGO titles before it, due to being a sports game, but it's somewhat underappreciated and a bit of a fun time if you like soccer games, in which Silicon Dreams had a fun time working on it, because again, they're known for their soccer games. However, this wouldn't be their only game ever to be released in 2002. But that will have to wait later down the line.
We now return to the world of the Bionicle, with their second GBA game called Bionicle Matoran Adventures, which was developed by Argonaut Games, the same development studio who made the first Star Fox game on the SNES back in 1993. This would be one of 2 Bionicle games they ever developed at the same time. The second one, we will get to that later down in the video, and strictly focus on the first one this segment. In this game, you play as one of 6 Bionicle figures, mainly the Matoran and the Turaga, to traverse certain 6 levels, each being based on the island of Motunui, while trying to find the Turaga Matau originally in the first level and boss as well, then later travel through the other lands and beat the second to final boss in the game, while the Borak War is still going. Unlike the first GBA game, which was a top-down isometric game, this one is a straightforward 2D platformer game, albeit a bit longer, because again, there are 6 levels, though they added one thing to the game, and that is switching characters so they could solve difficult puzzles, which this type of gimmick is similar to the Lost Viking games, but maybe in a loose term, since the other characters still follow you around, instead of waiting until switching back. Finally, are the pickup items, and there are mostly the typical ones like health, 1-ups, power-ups, the usual, and nothing else. When the second Bionicle game for the GBA was released in October 28, 2002, it received some mixed reception upon its release, though nowhere near as critical for the first GBA game. Examples like Matt Helgson of Game Informer gave it a 7.75 out of 10, and was one who said its gameplay compared it to the Lost Vikings. Then Jem Roberts of Total Advance rated it a 74%, in which he praised the graphics and gameplay, but complained about the game being too rough. And last but not least, Michael Lafferty of GameZone gave it a 7.2 out of 10, and praised for its solid and pleasant diversion, but also complained about being an average arcade adventure. Still, he did like it with its charm and innovative ideas. However, despite some of its praises, with a little bit of criticism to it, there were still the reviewers who gave it a negative reception, such as Michael, aka Nasreddin of German magazine publication Planet Game Boy, gave it a 43%, saying that it was uncreative and similar to how one other reviewer said it in the first GBA game, suggested the readers play with the Lego toys instead of playing it. And possibly the one who dunked really hard on the second GBA game was Adam TME of IGN, giving it the lowest score of 3 out of 10. And lambasted the game due to the visuals, the jittery camera, its very short length, and the amount of leap of faith. Resulted in the many deaths of the bottomless pits, and in the end he said in 2 quotes, "It's bland and glitchy, and less than the average platformer." Despite its mixed to bad reception, like I mentioned it again, it's nowhere near as critical than the first GBA game, and somewhat of a step up to that as well, thanks to Argonaut Games, who actually did try to make a decent GBA game in that short of a deadline, since they were developing 2 Bionicle games at the same time. However, while the first one is an okay game, but with mixed bag responses, the second on the other hand is, well, that will have to wait in another segment.
Okay, so the next segment is going to be a little bit different, because not only is this one of the most infamous brands that LEGO have ever created, but it's also a commercial failure and a major flop from the LEGO Group, and that brand was simply called Galidor. Now you may be asking like, what the hell is this? Why does it exist? And most importantly, what the heck is a Galidor? In order to explain this, I have to make a very short summary in a 2 to 3 minute short history essay. Galidor was a failed attempt to make a media franchise based on the LEGO Group when they were dealing with financial troubles despite having Bionicle by their sides a few years in, though I presume that this was before it was starting to become successful in the mid-2000s. The idea for it came from very young LEGO creators who were just starting out with the LEGO Group and had a concept idea where they could make action figures with detachable LEGO parts, which were starting to create somewhere in the late 90s. But in order to come to fruition, they did it by making a television series based on the concept of the brand in the show's premise, according to the main page of the Wikipedia summary. The series follows teenager Nicholas Nick Bluetooth, yes, that's actually his real last name, and his friend Aldra Zane after they are transported to the outer dimension where Nick uses his newfound glitch. Did they seriously call it by that word? Whatever, shape-shifting ability to aid resistance efforts against the tyrant Gorm, who has conquered the outer dimension in search of the hidden realm of Galidor. That's why it's called by that bizarre name, even though it still doesn't make any lick of sense. The show aired on February 9th, 2002 on the Fox Kids program, which, side note, would become the final original show to be aired, not counting anime imports, before shutting down and renaming it to Foxbox in the same year. The show was originally meant to last for 5 seasons and would be direct ties with the brand of toys and a bunch of other medias too, like video games and comics. But unfortunately that didn't came through and ultimately became the biggest flop that LEGO ever created. Due to the confusing story, having no idea what the brand was supposed to be because of the package, and being sided with Bionicle, in which case the LEGO Group accidentally created a rival with themselves, this resulted of the show being cancelled, in which lasted for only 2 seasons instead of the originally planned 5, ending on August 24th, 2002, and thus the brand was discontinued shortly in early 2003 and became the worst brand not just the 2000s but all time, and would have been the end of the LEGO Group if not for the already mentioned Bionicle and sets based on a recognized movie franchise, more on that in the next part, which both were slowly starting to become success and more popular by the mid-2000s, which thankfully didn't end the LEGO Group and still managed to survive from all of this after that train wreck of a brand, thus marked the end of their financial troubles, at least in the 2000s. Now, there are some parts that I left out in my short summary, like the budget on the CGI animation, the Disney company being involved, conspiracy theories, yes, that was a thing that happened, believe it or not, and the very bizarre models, including the main character, which, yeah, no comment. but I don't have time discussing on it, so instead I'll recommend a video about the failure of the brand called Lego Galidor, the toy that almost bankrupted Lego by Slow Start, in which he does a great job explaining about the history and details of the brand. The link is in the description below. But wait until this video is finished. And now, let's get back to the subject. Now, with that being out of the way, let's talk about the video games that were based on the brand and TV show, specifically 3 of them. Starting with the web browser called Galidor Quest, released in an unknown date but the year of 2002, it's a top-down game where you can create your character and must traverse through stages by using your glitching techniques to cross through, and that's about it. It's as average of a Flash game in a usual sense. But I do admire the creativity of it despite being a short game, like an hour and a half. But still, a positive as you can say of the brand to say at the very least. Unfortunately, no reviews or reception to the Flash game. What a shame. Next is the GBA game called Galidor Defenders of the Outer Dimension, released in October 29th, 2002, just a few months after the cancellation of the TV show. Published by both Electronic Arts, though under their brand name EA Games, and LEGO Software, and developed by Tiertex Design Studios, the same studio who made Soccer Mania on GBA, it is a generic 2D platformer where you go from point A to point B and go through obstacles and enemies by using your glitch gimmick and all that. The reception of the port were mixed, with the only source of information is from Metacritic, with the critic Metascore being a 53 out of 100. 1 was positive, 2 were mixed, and the last 2 were negative. As for the user Metascore, there's completely nothing and no rating, so once again, what a shame. And finally is the PC/console version of Galidor Defenders of the Outer Dimension, and oh boy, this is going to get a bit messy. So, the development for this version started all the way back in 1999 when the conceptual idea of Galidor was coming to fruition. The goal for this is to create an action platformer which was given the amount of time to say at least, and would be slated for release in 2002 for PC, PS2, and GameCube versions alongside the GBA version of the same name, but moved to 2003, a few months later. As for the PC/console version, it was developed by Asylum Entertainment, the same studio who attempted to make the PS1 version of LEGO Stunt Rally, but never finished due to both the poor sales of the original PC version and the US launch of the PS2. The game was going to be a linear style where you control the main character, Nick, where you do some platforming and fighting by using your glitch morph abilities like jumping, combat, shooting, or flying to traverse through the stages. As you can tell by this footage, aside from the weird character models, mainly Nick and his glitch forms, it did seem like it was going a bit smoothly, and can really tell by the development team putting some time and effort on this game, since they were given this amount of time over the span of 2 to 3 years, even though some of the stages can be a tad bit generic at times, including the final portions of the game, and that's because the people didn't actually enjoy developing the game despite the years of creating it. Why? Well, mainly due to the same reason, and that is the very confused brand, which even the people who were working on it had no idea for this brand, and felt like they just created a generic platformer game with only somewhat involvement with the show, and even finding out that it was going to be a flop anyways because of the failures of the brand it was based on. Though they were just going to let the game be released in 2003 without any promotions and move on to other projects. But that wasn't the case because unfortunately it didn't even make that set deadline and ultimately announced that the PC/consoles version of the game was cancelled because of financial instability and the lack of distribution. Thus, never saw the light of day, making almost the second Asylum game involved with LEGO that never got released. For the consoles version, why? Well, because the PC version, believe it or not, did actually release, but as a bundles pack with a few scattered releases in between 2004 to 2006, with many different publishers, either Focus Multimedia, Tandem, Verlag, or Valusoft. Not that the PC version finally got the release after many years. What did the fans and critics give it? One word: meh. And that's all you're getting for the reception and nothing else. And thus, we now come to an end of this Galidor brand and its video games once and for all. But now, here's the tricky question. How do I follow up the next segment after that bloated mess? Oh wait, I know. When I mentioned that the GBA version was developed by Tiertex Design Studios, who were the same development team who made the Soccer Mania on GBA, which was a port to the PC version that was developed by Silicon Dreams, and remember what I said that it wouldn't be their only game ever to be released in 2002? Well, the time has finally come. Take it away, Rebellious Robot.
Thanks, EX. Like he said, this wouldn't be Silicon Dreams' only game in 2002, because there is another one being the next installment of the LEGO Island series. Not just that, but a little different than the previous installments. Believe it or not, the first development attempt for the third game started all the way back in July 2000, when the second game was still in development at the time. Though, it was a much smaller team, which they were called Team 3, who wanted to make a LEGO Island sequel after they finished with their previous game, Dogs of War. Soon after they finished on that project, they officially began working shortly after. Dean Roskell, the developer of Silicon Dreams, said that in a very early concept and prototype of the game, had a little technical design, and was using terrain system that could deform in real time. They were also adding multiplayer, trading cards, and a camera system once they finished on the program. However, despite early progress, the project had to be pulled on halt to work on the GBA version of LEGO Island 2, though after finishing the GBA port, the first development attempt of LEGO Island 3 was later scrapped due to unknown reasons whatsoever from Team 3. Meanwhile, some other smaller team were creating a different kind of LEGO Island game, though a bit loosely, which went under the code name The Silk Road. The game was originally going to be an RPG game and was supposed to be based on the adventurous theme, in which the story was based on the trail of Marco Polo, which later turned into a real LEGO set from the adventurous theme called Orient Expedition in 2003. The gameplay style would have been based on or ideas either EverQuest or Asheron's Call if it was an online PC game, or The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time if it was a PC and console game. The locations would have taken various places like Arabia, China, India, and Tibet. And there were plans to add Pepperoni and the Brickster in the game. So did the LEGO character from the Adventurers theme, Mr. Hates, which he later appeared in LEGO Island 2 as an allied villain. Unfortunately, that too was scrapped because the testing phase weren't that well positive by game testers, and realized that it was too ambitious and difficult to create. Many of its developers were starting to become very confused and generally had no direction of where this project was going, and started to become either a sequel or a loose spin-off to LEGO Island, since both Pepperoni and the Brickster were part of the Silk Road project. Dean Roskell had this to say in a very long quote. Sure, so LEGO Island 3 wasn't a clear sequel to LEGO Island 2. We had to work with LEGO and understand their plans for which themes they were wanting to promote over the upcoming seasons that fit the timeline of the game's release. So early on, the team were working on basic technology, a new engine to drive whatever the game was going to be that would utilize the new PlayStation 2 hardware. Myself, along with producers from Silicon Dreams and LEGO, were trying to build the plans for taking LEGO's product theme leads products and building out a concept that fit. So at the time, they were discussing a product line based on the Silk Road. LEGO also had an adventures theme. I can't recall if they were going to be built as exclusive sets or combined so that the Silk Road would become a sub-theme of adventures. I did a ton of research into the history of the Silk Road and Arabian Nights. The proposal I built was to have a multi-location adventure which included the LEGO adventure sets and locations. Pepper would be the main player character and would be themed around a story based on the Silk Road and Arabian Nights. I did some digging through old boxes and found a sample dungeon adventure I designed to show the type of game this would be. As you can see, the adventure based in Arabia used a story based on an idea taken from 1001 Arabian Nights. Pepper, the player, and his partner Johnny Thunder from LEGO Adventures. This was the only dungeon designed to be fleshed out like this, as it was a proposal to see if this fit LEGO's wants and products and theme needs. The design of this game, unlike LEGO Island 2, was to be more like Zelda Ocarina of Time, using a flow of moving across a set of different landscapes with some backtracking, building up a set of key tools which would unlock the ability to access new spaces and perform new abilities, each area culminating in some form of dungeon and boss fight, which would test the player's skills using their growing set of abilities, while also unlocking new abilities for use in future dungeons. This was a very different design and scope of the project, which that in a combination of LEGO deciding not to go with a Silk Road theme after doing some market tests with their own product line proposals. I believe they had some mock-up sets where they showed people for feedback. We axed. Following this was making a new product theme to the table based on extreme sports. This fit closer to the existing range of LEGO Island games, as Pepper was already a skateboarder, and the island could make for a good basis for a skate park and style environment, easily adapting to the physical sets being produced. They did try to salvage this project by reworking the concept to be in line with the LEGO Island games, though still had the adventure sub-theme to it, but it didn't work out in the end, and ultimately the Silk Road project was officially cancelled once and for all. After both these projects were shelved, you may think that the Silicon Dreams developers just considered giving up on the third island game and move on to other projects. But what if I tell you that this wasn't the case, and that there was even another development attempt by an even smaller group of developers, but this time they had a head start back in June 2000. It may sound crazy to think about it, but it's true. All thanks to a developer by the name of Rich Hancock, along with other designers from Billund, which they started to work on not just a third LEGO Island game, but also a tie-in with the LEGO set theme as well. They pitched the idea to Billund and later the LEGO Group, and wanted to have both the theme and the next installment around extreme sports and stuntmen as the next brand in Game 2. While there hasn't been any confirmation of what the inspiration around both themes as of
2025.
But I think in the best theory presumably is that they were inspired by the trend of extreme sports of the late 90s and early 2000s. Specifically, the skateboarding craze, all thanks to the X games, and most importantly, the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games that were released during that time, which was a good opportunity to follow that trend since the main character Pepperoni rides a skateboard. So obviously it was a no-brainer to capitalize on that said craze. As for the stuntmen, on the other hand, I don't really know. I think in the best case in some ways is that they watch a lot of action-packed blockbuster movies of the late 90s, and wanted to use that as well in the game and the theme of the sets. And that's about it. Now again, there isn't a statement if the inspiration of those themes were true or not, but hey, that's just a theory, and in the end more of a speculation. Anyways, once the pitch was confirmed for both Billund and the LEGO Group, a separate team from Silicon Dreams began work on the third installment shortly afterwards. The gameplay and its minigames would relatively be the same as the second game, but with a little slight tweaks here and there. Examples like the main protagonist Pepperoni, while he plays almost the same like throwing pizzas and using a skateboard from the second game, but his controls are much more better for the most part since now he can throw pizzas much more faster using a skateboard to do actual tricks, and the most interesting one of them all, having a higher double jump, which is a bit interesting but still a good mechanic to say the least. Next is the minigames, in which they play a much bigger role of the game, since they're basically part of the action stunt movie. Though, mostly all of them involves vehicle sections with a little bit of improvements to make it a bit more easier and redefined, like cars, motorbikes, jet skiers, and planes, which would be the set figures for the Extreme Stunts brand that it was based on. including LEGO characters of the LEGO Island series making their minifigure debut. The only minigame that doesn't involve vehicles is sky surfing in the last minigame, which is usual basic platforming and nothing else. Next is a remodeling of LEGO Island for the third time, and this one is bigger than the last. And I mean that literally, because looking at the scale of the previous two islands, it is a more open world, and have a bunch of locations of small buildings spread throughout the island. Like a mountain terrain, the film set to start the minigame at a skate park. This makes sense why it was so big, because unlike the second game and more like the first game, you only play on one island again, so this is why it had to be like that way. However, there were some locations that had to be removed or cut from the final version, due to time constraints like having a bunch more taller buildings, including a vent building, a football field, a beach ball lake, and last but not least, is a railway system in which you could have taken a train to get to the location you want to go, and was easily a shortcut because of the big size map, which, believe it or not, was also different compared to the island we have in the game, seeing that the earlier islands of the third game were vastly different, unlike the final version, and had a lot more to it, which I just previously mentioned. But at last, that didn't happen, and was unfortunately cut altogether. So did the minifigures of the previous LEGO Island games like Rolf, Polaroid, Self-Morphin Plant, Bill Ding, and Pete Bog, though new LEGO minifigures would make their debut, like the director, a Steven Spielberg lookalike, Belinda Blink, and Shugu, just to name a few. And last is a story and title change. First is a main plot in which it involves Pepperoni being hired to be a stuntman for the upcoming action film from the director, but in order to help make this film, they released a Brickster to be a part of the film as an antagonist, which he obligingly agreed to make the film. Even though after filming was completed, he fled away to an unknown island and plans on taking over LEGO Island for the third time, because of course he does. He's a main antagonist of the series. And also a bit of a side note to why they release him, just to be exact, because that seems like a very dumb decision to do since he tried to take over the island twice, and would have been at least self-aware on how to trust the Brickster after that, but hey, dumb video game logic I suppose, since it targets towards children after all. Anyways, back to the topic. As for the title change, it was originally supposed to be called LEGO Island 3 Extreme Stunts, but it was later changed to Island Extreme Stunts in order to fit the brand name, which is a bit confusing why they did this, but oh well, that's their decision I guess. After 2 years of development, it was finally time to release it, and also the brand as well as for the tie-in. And when it came out on the PS2 first in November 30th, and later Microsoft Windows in December 3, it unfortunately did not meet the expectation, and was a commercial failure upon its release, with the reviews gaining a mixed reception, but on the upside it wasn't as bad as the second game, with some giving it some decent ratings with a total of 71 for the PC version, and 63 for the PS2. Both of them are from Metacritic, and for the critics, they also gave it a decent reception. Examples like Official PlayStation Magazine, the one who gave the Metacritic rating for the PS2, commented in a positive manner saying that there's surprising depth and a lot to do for a younger crowd. It's perfect for an under 13 gamer, and IGN gave it a decent score on it as well, though with a less positive output, and even said that there are much better titles for children. 15 days before the PS2 release, don't ask me why they did this, just go with it, there was a GBA version releasing November 15th. However, rather than an open world type game like the PC and PS2 version, it's more like a collection of minigames that you must beat through. Most of them are a part of the action film, while others are random, just to say at least. Unfortunately, there isn't a reception or rating for this version, and is often forgotten by many due to the lack of advertisement, aside from one promotional poster with the PS2 and PC box art together in one. As for the Extreme Stunts brand that we're based on, it also didn't do so well and not as popular as I thought because of the commercial flop of the game, and was ultimately discontinued in early 2003, which makes some very rare collectibles by LEGO fans alike. But that wasn't even the worst part, because Silicon Dreams, the one who made this game as well as Island 2 and Soccer Mania, would be their last game they ever develop, because in September 3rd, 2003, they would unfortunately shut down their development team, mainly due to liquidation, financial troubles, and some business stuff. Since 2002, there hasn't been another LEGO Island game as of
2025.
And now relatively has been a forgotten series by many gaming fans and modern LEGO fans outside of the first Island game. But believe it or not, this wouldn't be the only development studio that would close down due to a declining LEGO series.
During the same year, Attention to Detail, the one who made the second LEGO Racers game, were developing a third entry to the series. However, rather than continuing the kid-friendly minifigure style of the first two installments, this one was very different and completely separated from the LEGO Racers series up to that point. The real reason for this direction is unknown, because there is little to no information about its development history and why they went to this route for this series. But at least we have information on what the brand is based on and a story in quotation marks. We'll get to that shortly. But for now, let's discuss about it, shall we? The style, visual, and models of the game is based on the LEGO Technics LEGO Racers sub-themed sets called Drome Racer, hence the name of the game. They were much more advanced compared to the normal LEGO sets. It uses a range of model pieces rather than the traditional LEGO bricks and were possibly the first ones, to my knowledge, that used remote control technology with some of the sets. A total of 54 were created in this lineup and only managed to last for 2 years, from 2002 to 2004. The sales and successes are unknown because of either obscurity or wasn't that popular during that time. There was also a website based on the sub-theme brand like bios, videos, and flash games, which I'm not going to discuss all of it, otherwise this segment would take way too long. So I'm just going to leave some video shots of some of these flash games in about a few seconds. And that's about it. Moving on to the story. The plot and setting of Drome Racers takes place in a fictional world set in the futuristic year of 2015. Insert joke here. Where you partake in a league championship in a dome called Drome, led by the commissioner named Dromulus, who's in charge of the competition and the one who can change terrains using a technology to terraform the landscape areas of the dome at his desire. There are 6 teams in which they partake in the championship league for entertainment purposes and win to survive in that said championship in order to become the best driver of the league. The teams are HOT, RED, Maverick, Zero, Exoforce, and Nitro, in which the last one is the main team of the plot, led by Max Axel, a young rookie and newcomer of the team. Chicane, a sassy teen but highly skilled mechanic, Slot, a data analyst and statistics of the group, and also your load and save progress as well in the game. And finally, Rocket, a retired veteran of Team Nitro who gives advices to Axel, and an obvious reference to Rocket Racer of the previous LEGO games, but in name only. There are also 4 other members exclusively in an FMV video, but unfortunately they're not named, so I'm not going to go into full details about them. And on an unrelated note, it is the second LEGO game to have no minifigures as the characters, but human characters instead, in a LEGO video game. The first time it happened was back in 1999 with LEGO Friends, not to be confused with LEGO Friends. Okay, back to topic. And that's the story of the game, if you're watching it separately on a LEGO website. Because in the actual game, there's no mention or even an FMV intro about it unless if you have the manual of the game. Instead, it just shows off the gameplay of racing in the opening with early 2000s edge presentation to it, and that's about it. And even in the career mode, when they do actually show off the FMV video when you begin your career, but it just cuts off to this awkward position and then loads us to the career mode and nothing more. In fact, not only we didn't get to see the other members as well as the other teams, but you don't even get to see Max at all. You know, the main protagonist of the game, and only appears or even mentioned in name form only. I don't understand why they did this or how it was an ideal, not good ideal, just ideal in general to not have the main character visible and only one FMV video for a split 20 seconds of nothing but the view of the dome. But I think the answer can be found in the reception, but we'll get to later down the line. Now, for how the game plays. It's your standard racing game, whether you begin in two positions, either standard or a rolling start, with two types of racing being on-road and off-road, with track environments, with route variations, either small or big courses. There are power-ups like the previous installments, however with different functions, being repulsor, RC missiles, flare, and etc. There are also other challenges like drag racing and an one-on-one race challenge in order to upgrade your car that you chose, and that's pretty much it for the gameplay. Sorry that this one is short compared to the other, but I really have nothing else to comment on. And even saying this just feels boring and not even that interesting of a game, even with its lore. But that's not even the worst part. No, the worst thing about the game is that there is no customization of building your vehicle. Now I get why they didn't implement it, since it was based on the Technics lineup sets and would be much more difficult to customize the vehicle in the game. But still, it is such a shame that they didn't add this feature because it would have some minor resemblance to the previous LEGO Racer games, or even as a matter of fact, a LEGO game in general. Because outside of the Drome vehicle sets, it feels nothing like a LEGO game at all and just feels like a generic racing game of the early 2000s. And sadly that became a true fact with the reception and sales. Because when it was released first on PlayStation 2 in November 20th, 2002, Microsoft Windows in December 4th, 2002, and GameCube in September 16th, 2003, it received lukewarm reviews with mixed to average across its reception. Some examples from Metacritic gave the PS2 version a 57, with critics rated in the 50s to 60s range, such as GameZone, GameSpot, and official US PlayStation, in which the last one reviewed it in just one quote: "Buy some Legos instead." The reviews for the PC and GameCube versions did fare a little better than the PS2 version, with the PC version having a much better frame rate and resolution, even though it ran on secure ROM or DRM, which you cannot play on modern computers, thanks to Balint Bordy, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, who pointed it out. And the GameCube version having enhancement visuals and new features like a shield power-up, a new menu UI, a in-race announcer, and a new battle mode which you could run up to 4 players, making this somewhat the definitive version of Drome Racers. Though despite these changes from both versions, it still didn't help boost the sales, and like the PS2 version, got mixed reception. Like the GameCube version received mixed reviews from Nintendo Power, while the PC version had some decent reviews like GameZone's Oval Dog, who gave it a good review and said that it was a blast to play, but like I mentioned before, it was still mixed for some reviewers, like Ryan Davis of GameSpot, in which he commented what little originality it has, like the qualifying drag races, is seriously underplayed, and most of the experience comes off as generic. A planned Xbox version was scheduled to be released somewhere in late 2003, since it had all new features, just like the GameCube version, but was ultimately cancelled for unknown specific reason whatsoever. And last but not least is the GBA version, released on April 11th, 2003, first in Europe, and June 19th, 2003 in America 2 months later. Co-published by THQ instead of Electronic Arts, and developed by Mobius Entertainment, who would rechange their name to Rockstar Leeds and later go on to make the portable games based on Rockstar's notable games. It plays very different compared to the previous versions. Rather than be in a Mode 7 racing type, it utilized the GBA 3D hardware to push the limits. Instead of career mode, it's a championship mode, where you can actually pick a team rather than only one team. And lastly, the controls are much more tighter and can be more easier for casual players. This version was much more highly received and slightly the best conversion compared to the PS2, PC, and GameCube versions, with GameSpot's Frank Provo saying Drome Racers is the most technically impressive racing game to hit the Game Boy Advance in a long time. But despite its praises, it still couldn't top the sales of the game, mainly being a handheld port, and ultimately suffered than the rest of the versions, unfortunately. However, that wouldn't be the worst part about it, because much like Silicon Dreams, attention to detail, the one who made this and Racers 2, would be their last game they ever developed, and suffered the same fate as them, being financial troubles and liquidation, which led them to the closure of the development studio in August 28, 2003. Despite the lukewarm reception and the development studio shutdown, there were plans to make a sequel to Drome Racers, aka the fourth installment to the LEGO Racers series in general, and another one called LEGO Racers CC, aka the fifth installment as well, but both of them were cancelled and never saw the light of day outside of concept art and early screenshots of both projects. After that, it unfortunately came to an end and, like a previous known series, became forgotten outside of the first. At least for the time. Because unlike the LEGO Island series, there had been attempts to bring back the series rather than staying dormant forever. Examples like LEGO Racers 2007, no relations to the 1999 original, released in that said year, only on mobile Java phones, but not that many people know about its existence because it was an early mobile game, and also, to be honest, will not be discussing about the LEGO mobile games in general, and another main entry to home/handheld consoles called LEGO Racers, the video game, also no relations to the 1999 original, which was set to be released on Nintendo consoles only, being the Wii and DS in 2009, and would have been based on the Tiny Turbo's subsets, which would have been a better name for the game, but for unknown reasons never made the deadline and cancelled the game that same year. It would take about 21 years later until they finally made a new LEGO Racers game for home consoles. But that's a story for another day.
We now return back to the Flash games, with the next one being LEGO WorldBuilder, released in 2002. In this game, you create a subset of 20 LEGO figures, either vehicles, buildings, robots, or animals, to complete in an objective goal. There are 3 worlds in this game, each contain 12 levels to complete, which in total are 36 levels. But that's not all, there are 2 extra worlds with 12 levels as well, making a total of 60 levels. The reason for the extra worlds is because when it was released in 2002, it wasn't completely finished yet due to the fact that the third world, as well as the extra worlds, haven't been completed yet, and it was labeled coming soon. So you only played the first two worlds and had to wait for the finished worlds until later down the line, in which there was no specific date of when it was added because it was an early Flash game. So as for what the gameplay is, you control a bunch of subset that you have in the level, and place it by moving with your mouse, while avoiding enemies like crabs, both land and water, scorpions, alligators, T-Rexes, and sharks. Once you finish that level, you move on to the next level, with the challenges being more difficult, as you progress level by level. And that's pretty much it for gameplay. As for the reviews and reception for the game, well, there's no such thing due to being an obscure Flash game and all that. A planned sequel called LEGO WorldBuilder 2 was in the making, with the same gameplay and visuals as the first, with the only exception being that the game was going to be more challenging, having new LEGO subsets in which there are 6, and one new enemy type called Lion. However, the game is in an unfinished state, with only the first 2 worlds being finished, with the rest of the worlds being scrapped and ultimately cancelled in 2009. While this Flash game is nothing more to talk about because there's no history development or reception to it, however, the next Flash game is a little more discussed about, because it's the prequel to one of the best Flash games back in 2001, albeit with less about its development and more so on the gameplay, the improvements, and the reception, so I'll pass this one to CX for the next segment for right now.
Thanks, Rebellious Robot. Like he said, there is less development about the prequel game because it uses the same engine like the first, with some improvements and a bit of a different gameplay format. But first, let's discuss about the story of the game. In this prequel, you play as Holly, where you have to compete in a tournament by beating a bunch of mini-games from 6 locations, being Gakaru, Unukuru, Kokoru, Likuru, Pokaru, and Takaru, each having a crystal as a prize and must obtain all 6 of them in order to complete in the tournament, while gaining skills in training mode, either stamina, willpower, accuracy, strategy, and strength, in order to get better at the mini-games. And that's the beginning to middle plot of the game. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, otherwise I would spoil it, unlike the previous part. So play it or watch it on YouTube if you want to know about it. While the plot of the game isn't grand scale as the first game, and doesn't have any connection with the Bionicle series whatsoever, but there are several elements that do carry over the series from Mask of Light, mainly the sets of course, and it does have at least a bit of a climax in the final parts of the game. But like I said a few seconds ago, no spoilers. The gameplay was completely changed compared to the previous one, being that you can now see the main protagonist in the game in the third-person view rather than first-person in the first game, though it is still a point-and-click game. The items you carried have expanded with the same ones, but also the new ones as well. And the frame rate is a bit of a step up and isn't as choppy than the first, though sometimes it still occurs, mostly lagging. The objectives are mostly the same from one mission to another, and traveling through the Matanui Island, though albeit a bit limited. Much like the first, it would have updates. However, rather than new content for a finished game, they would release a set of chapters by almost every month from the beginning of May 2003 all the way to the end of January 2004, in which in total there are 7, as shown on text right here. When the final chapter of the game was finished, it barely got any attention, had no reviews and reception, and wasn't rewarded with anything unlike the first game. Now you may be questioning what happened, and why it didn't get the same recognition as the first. Well, it's because for one reason why it happened, and that is the glitches. While it wasn't apparent at first when the first chapter was released, but over the release of a chapter every month, the game started to suffer from bugs, lags, and of course, glitches that can cause the game to crash and had to start all over again. There are also other problems with the game, like grinding or being way too overpowered. But I'm not gonna talk full details about it, so instead I'll link in a site called Matanui Online Game 2 What Went Wrong, down in the description below. Years after the final chapter release, it was moved to the Bionicle website that was officially playable as a Kanuka Club exclusive in 2008. However, the next year it was removed from its website and at the time was unplayable and considered to be lost media. Until it came back during an unofficial download thanks to a fan from BZ Power named Biomaniac archiving the game and actually fixing the problems from the game, like removing all the bugs and glitches, and even modified to add a save feature to the game thanks to another fan from BZ Power by the name of Jet's Landing Board. So now can experience the game for the first time in years. In conclusion, despite not being well received by Bionicle fans, it is still important to know that a prequel to one of the best LEGO Flash games exists thanks to the fans archiving it, and once again would be used as sets from the Mask of Light movie. And hey, even if it wasn't as remembered as the first one, at least it's nowhere near as a critical failure as the other Bionicle game, which... yeah, it's that time to talk about it. By that I mean I'm going to be talking about it rather than switching it to Rebellious Robot for the next segment, because oh boy, there's a lot to talk about, not just the game, but the state of LEGO games up to that point. Okay, enough stalling. Here we go. If you notice a pattern since the beginning of the 2000s, you can tell that so many LEGO games have been both mixed reception and financial failures due to the games not being well made or straight up not good. However, there was one LEGO game from the Bionicle series that was so badly received and a lukewarm reception that it almost completely ended LEGO games as a whole. But before we get into that, we must first start at the development history back in 2001, when the LEGO Group and LEGO Software arranged a meeting with Argonaut Games, the one who created Matoran Adventures, and were asked again to develop a Bionicle game, this time for home consoles. Starting with the PS2, weirdly enough, and not the PC first, and then later on GameCube, Xbox, and PC. After the arrangement, they made the deal by the end of 2001. And in the beginning of 2002, alongside with Electronic Arts co-publishing the game, the development officially began. To create the game, they used MS Dev Studio to code the program for the game's graphics along with other tools, like Photoshop for texturing the worlds, 3D Studio Max for modeling the worlds and characters, and Maya for the animation of the character models. Another thing, for the gameplay, rather than being a hack and slash, it goes more of weapons-based approach and wanted to have a different element to it, which is clearly based around on the 6 elements of the tools, of course. But that's not all. Each of the characters have a different element ability as well. Examples like swimming underwater, snowboarding, lava boarding, limited flight, and a special weapon called a Nova, or Nova Blast, which is an explosive that releases of all the elemental energy to wipe out all the enemies in your sight. Despite having 6 playable characters, there's actually a 7th one being Takanova, but that comes at the end of the game and must play through the entire game first before unlocking this character. Next is the story, in which the plot of the game, the main tools, are just sitting and relaxing while watching a play until it gets interrupted by a swarm of enemies, led by Makuta, the main antagonist of the game. and causing havoc around the island. So the Tolos must stop Makuta and end his reign of terror before it's too late. This may be the most simple plot of a Bionicle game, at least so far, compared to the previous titles before this. Why the plot feels rushed, we'll get to that later in a few minutes. Next is the levels, which is obviously based on the elements of the island, like jungle, snow, lava, water, etc. You have your typical levels, like trying to save the Matanuis, kill all the enemies, and obtaining collectibles, called the Light Stones. To unlock extras like unused character models, concept art of the game, and of course FMV videos from cutscenes in the game, a sneak peek from the Rashka toy sets, and the Mask of Light movie trailer. Though the game mixes things up, like auto-scrolling levels, being the already mentioned lava or snowboarding, or even in a level where you turn into a Tonuva and have a different set of moves to make it a bit interesting. Though a nice change of pace, on paper, but in actuality does immediately affect the game in certain points. And finally, the controls being tight and clearly one of its finest movements in Bionicle's first attempted game in a 3D environment. Well, almost. There are some problems with it, since again, rather than a hack and slash, it's a weapons-based approach, so the game has to be in an aim lock with some mixed results, whether it works or not. But at least the platforming sections are in the passable and can be fun at the very most. However, despite having all the best efforts for the game, it still manages to suffer a major issue, with possibly the biggest one being the development time. Why? Well, the game had to be completed in a span of a year and a half from its beginning in early 2002 all the way up to its completion in fall 2003. Why did they pick that specific date? Well, because they wanted to release it in between Bionicle's first direct-to-film Mask of Light, since most of the Bionicle characters are based on the film. Despite being two completely separate entities, released 1 month apart of each other, and most importantly, non-canon to the mainline lore, because the story of the game was not created by the Bionicle story team. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal since most of the games released during the time, because it usually take about this length. But given the fact that this is Bionicle's first video game for home consoles, not counting this one, and being one of the most recognized LEGO brand of the 2000s because of its lore, it's really disappointing that they have to release it that way. And also that there were originally going to have a lot more levels for all the 6 Tolos and Tolnuvas, but couldn't due to the deadline. So they have to reduce a chunk amount of levels, and a rushed plot really hurts the game's potential, and could have at the very least given a few more months and possibly released it in spring 2004 instead of fall 2003, because there was no way they could have released it in that span of the time, which unfortunately didn't by just 1 month away. And things would get even worse, because when it was released on October 10th, 2003 in Europe first, then October 20th in North America for the PS2 first, then later Xbox, GameCube, and PC, it was a critical failure, and received a mixed to negative reception amongst critics and fans of Bionicle. This is due to many things, like the elemental weapons not being utilized well, the game's extremely short length clocking in 2 hours, the weird camera angles in most of the areas, and finally its rushed story, along with lackluster characters with only a stereotype personality and possibly the most wooden dialogue ever to be voice acted in a Bionicle video game.
What's that noise?
I don't know, but I don't think it's friendly.
Tuatahu, spirits of fire.
The Tar Matoran have fled from the Borok.
Do not worry, Taragavakama. I will see to their safety.
I was investigating the totems and saw a great Kanoe mask floating on the lava.
You should return to the Koro. It's dangerous here. Kopaka, my brother, I have discovered the secret of the Borok's power, and it is also their weakness. Capture the Krana.
I'm chasing a Borok now. He's heading for the Kinney. There isn't much time.
Sorry to drop in like this, but I can't stay.
Toa? Gali?
I may be changed to Raganokama, but my love for my people remains the same.
And yet all is not well. The Borok Kal are a more fearsome foe than we have ever seen. They are threatening to overcome us all.
Do not fear. My Nuva power can overcome any obstacle.
Brother?
Your speed is needed elsewhere. Run and warn Tahu. It will give me great pleasure to deal with this. Let me give you a real Oluwahi welcome.
The mask I found was the Mask of Light. The Turaga sent me on a quest to find the 7th Toa.
7th Toa?
Only the 7th Toa can wear the mask.
And where is the 7th Toa?
I don't know. And now I've lost the mask to those creatures, and they're heading to destroy the Koro.
The Turaga say they are Rakshi, the sons of the Makuta, deadliest of foes.
Makuta. Brother, see the Chronicler to safety. I will deal with the Rakshi.
Deepwood. Sister Toa comes with a sorry bad tale.
Toalua, you know what news I bring?
The drums of Lekoro cry tell of sons of Makuta. But without my Suva, I cannot reach the threat.
Where are your Matoran to activate the Suva?
Captured. Lost.
You alone can find them, Luanuva. Find them, free them, and use the Suva to hunt for these sons of Makuta.
Hard promise, sister.
Behold, Makuta! I, the 7th Toa, have come to banish your darkness forever and return Mata Nui from his fitful slumber.
You defeat me? All by yourself? You are nothing. I shall defeat you within the blink of an eye.
While the PS2 and PC version received mixed to average reviews from both critics and fans, the Xbox and GameCube version, on the other hand, received unfavorable reviews from every side of the gaming landscape. Examples like Mary Jane Erlin of IGN said that it was hardly a game with a horrid camera system, a hodgepodge of gameplay styles, and a completely thin storyline. Another reviewer, Brian Wilkinson of Cube, stated that readers would have more fun buying a bucket of Lego and building a toilet than they would playing Bionicle. He also said it was a sad indictment of the video game industry's treatment of licensed properties. And lastly, Frank O'Connor of Official Xbox Magazine compared the Xbox version to the PS2 version, citing the problems like blocky textures, garish color palette, and primitive camera angles. He then ends the review by saying that the story and gameplay would only be appropriate to the serious Bionicle fans, given that it follows the bizarrely melodramatic plot of a T. Though some reviewers did try to give it a chance, like Adam Bisoner of Game Informer giving it praise to its solidarity of its gameplay, though he does admit that it's a bit too generic and said that it would be safe for children to play, in which he quotes, "kids with an affection of Legos that borders on obsession." And Paul Theobald of Xbox Nation said that it had some redeeming quilts and had plenty of promises, with the weapon mechanics being a welcome element of complexity. However, he does criticize its short-length story, but also its gameplay too, and the many generic level designs. So even with its defenders, they still couldn't redeem the home console/computer game because of its many huge flaws. 1 month before the PS2, PC, Xbox, and GameCube versions, there was a GBA port with the same name released in September 9th in North America, and then UK in September 26th. Co-published by THQ, again instead of EA, and developed by Mobius Entertainment, the same development studio who made Drome Racers, also on GBA. It's an isometric action platformer similar to Bionicle Quest for the Toa, but with one major difference since it was made by a different developer, and that's the gameplay layout. You still have the choice to play all 6 main characters, and still have the different abilities to each Bionicle, like limited flight and breathe underwater, minus the swimming. But you can also jump higher and grab onto ledges, exclusive to everyone, and again, like the console versions, you need to rescue the Matanuis, kill all the enemies, grabbing collectibles, and of course, stopping the Makuta. When it was released, it received a bit better than the console versions, with a reviewer of Nintendo Power praising the port and said that it was a welcome addition to the genre, but also stated that there's little else upon which to recommend the game. But despite all the praise of the GBA version, it still wasn't enough to be financial success, simply because it was a third-party handheld port, and almost 99% of it doesn't usually sell all that well, unless if it's a Nintendo game, of course. A sequel was planned in development called Bionicle City of Legends, with the gameplay being mostly the same, albeit with several improvements, and the story would have taken place before the Matoran moved to Matanui. However, after the commercial failure of Bionicle the game, it was ultimately scrapped and never saw the light of day until the late 2010s, when a tech demo was leaked online from the Biomedia project, which only contained one playable character, one enemy type, and unfinished levels, given the tech version was made between December 2003 to January 2004. But that would not be the worst of it. Why, you may ask? Well, because of 2 closures. First was Argonaut Games, the one who made Bionicle the video game, were in deep financial struggles and failed to pay licensing royalties with the studio, along with 2 other games that they also developed but flopped immediately, being SWAT, Global Strike Team, and iNinja. This led to laying off all the employees, with only releasing the final few titles being finished in 2004, along with cancelling projects that were in development or never made it out of the drawing board. And finally, on October 1st, 2004, Argonaut Games were officially liquidated, and 2 years later, on August 12, 2006, they shut down their development studio. Thus, Argonaut Games were no more. Until August 28, 2024, when it reopened as a boutique publisher by Jez Sen and plan on to re-release their older games, with the most recent one being a remastered version of Croc Legend of the Gobos. Back on track, and second and possibly the worst outcome of the 2 being LEGO Software, the publisher of these games. The reason why they had it the worst is more so the quality of the LEGO games during the first half of the 2000s. Because like I mentioned this early, if you notice a pattern of it, you figure that the games started to decline both quality and sales in general at the start of the new millennium. What started out with decently well LEGO games with some good qualities and minor successes in the late 90s, with one exception that we don't talk about, but quickly went downhill at the start of the 2000s, with each LEGO game not selling well than the last commercially. But not just that, but the quality of it suffered as well, losing that LEGO feel to it. Even the sequels to LEGO Island and LEGO Racers lose these certain elements of the creativity with each entry. And with Bionicle, the game, based on one of their most popular sets of the 2000s, couldn't even save it from a financial failure. The LEGO Group finally saw this as the final nail in the coffin, and in early 2004, LEGO Software, originally known as LEGO Interactive, after 7 years of publishing, officially closed down their division for good, and saw no hope to continue the video game business after 2003. But there was at least one LEGO game exclusively on handheld that did manage to come out in 2004.
And that game is LEGO Knights Kingdom, released for the Game Boy Advance in October 4th, 2004, in America first, and then October 8th in Europe 4 days later. Despite LEGO Software being closed down months earlier, but still had THQ to publish the game thankfully, and developed by Razorback Developments, exclusively created games for both GBA and DS from 2004 to 2010. It's an action-adventure game based on the Knights Kingdom sets, though it's not from the first version but the second version because of the radical departure from the colorful aesthetics, a much more action-oriented style, and a different variety of sets, either regular minifigures or Bionicle-style figures, which lasted for 2 years, from 2004 to 2006. With no explanation why it got discontinued, we may never know. The plot of the game is your standard stopping an evil entity before taking over the land type of story, in which you must defeat the Shadow Knight and his army and saving the kingdom, of course. You play as one of 4 colorful knights named Jaco, Danju, Santis, and Raskus. There's also a 5th playable Black Knight, Vladik, but must be unlocked by finishing the game. Sadly, there's no special abilities to each knight since they play the same and only control them one at a time. The gameplay is also standard. You must traverse through 9 levels, slash through a bunch of enemies, solve puzzles or tasks to unlock areas or special items, and again, defeat the Shadow Knight. There's also tournament mode, where you complete in 3 challenges, like hand-to-hand combat, jousting, and sword-to-lightning combat. And yep, that's pretty much it about the game. Very short, I know. When it released, it received a mixed reception from critics and casual users, like 62 from Metacritic, 64 from Game Rankings, and the rest ranging from 3 stars or 6 to 7 out of 10. But even if it wasn't negatively received, it barely became a success and wasn't that well known since it was only exclusive to the GBA, and again, third-party games on handheld don't usually sell that well. As for the Knights Kingdom brand, it did manage to have several web browser games during its lifespan, but that's pretty much it for the brand. And also THQ as well as parting ways with the LEGO Group after the game's release.
Like mentioned before, it barely made any success of Knights Kingdom for the GBA, and probably never did anyway since the LEGO Group shut down their publisher division a few months earlier. And for a while, it seemed that it was the end for LEGO video games as a whole due to the critical failure of each LEGO game from one after the other since the beginning of the 2000s. And would have marked the end for the LEGO Group entering the gaming business since they were doing great in the toy business again after their financial struggles in the late 90s, before making their comeback thanks to Bionicle and LEGO sets based on movie franchises, along with new IP brands as well. And it seemed like they were happy with it for not continuing the video game business.
But as you all know, that wasn't the case, because a year later the LEGO Group would collaborate with a movie production studio, known for the recognizable movie franchise, and along with several publishers and a development studio, that not only would become a long-term relationship with the LEGO Group, but would forever change the direction for LEGO video games moving forward, and eventually their grand comeback in the video game industry during the second half of the 2000s. But that's a story for another time. Thanks for watching part 3 of the series.